Hi guys, and welcome to this first video on how to set up a Windows Server environment. Okay, so this is tutorial 1 in this series, and in this tutorial we will be looking at how to set up an Active Directory domain hosted on a Windows Server 2008 R2 server. Okay, so this is the machine that I'll be using, and this machine is going to the properties. Let's see, this machine has 2 logical processors, 8 gigs of RAM, and we are using the trial version of Microsoft Server 2008 R2. Okay, so as I say, in this tutorial we'll be setting up an Active Directory domain, so that will involve setting up a DNS server, dhcp server, and the lot. Okay, so first off we need to set up a computer name. It has already got one set up on it. If we go to properties again, we'll see that it is win h7r blah 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 blah, and that's not a very ideal computer name for a server, so we'll be changing this to a more reasonable name. Okay, so click change settings, then click change. This is fairly simple stuff, so yeah, we'll call this TechTips serve. Okay, we want it on a workgroup environment to start with. We'll click OK. So you must restart your computer to apply these changes. So we'll just restart the machine now. Okay, so now we're back into the server. We need to set a static IP address, and this is basically to how do I put it, like assign a sort of address to the server so that all the domain machines will know where the server is, if that sort of makes sense. It's like sending a postcard. You need to have an address that's fixed so you can send the postcard. Okay, so from the initial configuration tasks, we need to go to the configure networking option. This will bring up the network and internet settings page. So we need to set up the default network adapter. You may have a team on your server. This is just to increase the connection speed of your LAN. So if we right click on the network connection and go to properties, then we need to click IP version 4 and click on properties. We then need to assign a static IP address, so if we just find out what it's set itself. So it's picked up the IP address 10.0.7.12. It's picked that up from my server at home. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to set a different IP address. For this tutorial, we're going to set the IP address 10.9.9.9. This will probably be different if you're using a smaller network, such as a home network or a small business network. It may go 192.168. And then there'll be a number and then another number, and it's choice basically. You need to pick from that. The subnet mask will automatically be inputted when you click on that box, so that doesn't really need to be changed. The default gateway, that will be your router or firewall, and the DNS server to start with is your router or firewall. Okay, so to apply this we need to click OK and close. And there we go, that's set now. So we can check by going to the command prompt and typing in that ipconfig again. So you see it says 10.9.9.9. Okay, so that is now applied on the server. Okay, so from the initial configuration tasks, we can now see that we can see that the Server 2008 R2 operating system is quite a bit different than 2003. Okay, so one thing that I like to set up is remote desktop, and we allow connections. Click OK. This can prove helpful in some scenarios, but I find out about that in a later tutorial. Okay, so Windows 5 will need to leave by itself. We need to add a role, and that role will be the Active Directory Domain Services. We can add that first. It needs .NET Framework 3.5.1 to run properly. You can find out more by clicking the "Why are these features required" button. Okay, so add required features and click next. We need to click next again and install. So that is now setting up and installing the files required to host the Active Directory Domain Services role. Okay, so once the Active Directory Domain Services has been installed, we'll need to start the DC promo, which will promote the server to a domain controller. So to do this, we need to click on this blue label here, and that will say close this wizard and launch the Active Directory Domain Services install. Okay, so that will start. There we go. So this is the wizard that will help you set up the domain name and the hosting servers. Okay, so we need to click next. You can check advanced mode, but I'm not going to do that for the purpose of this tutorial. Next, and next again. So we want to create a new forest, a new domain in a new forest. So we'll click that and click next. So it's basically saying about the local administrator having a blank password. So to fix this, we need to apply a password. To do this, we need to just go into the user control panel and change password. Okay, so now I've got that password issue sorted. We can now type the fully qualified domain name, or the fqdn, of the new forest root domain. So for this tutorial, we'll be calling this TechTipsNet.local. The local is important. That basically shows there that it does not conflict with any other domain name. So if you had techtipsnet.co.uk or .com and you set up a fqdn of that address, it may conflict later in the install process. Okay, so click next and check whether the forest name is already in use. Okay, so for the forest functional level, I'd recommend setting it higher, preferably to 2008 R2, because then you can use all the features that 2008 R2 supports. And you click next then, and this server will become a DNS server and a global catalog server. Click next. Okay, so we need to start the DNS install, so press yes. Okay, so I recommend you keep these folders default. Next, enter your restore password in case anything goes wrong, and click next and it will install. Remember to tap the reboot on completion. That will restart the machine and bring up the new domain for the first time. Okay, so we'll just wait for this to complete and then we will start on the dhcp. Okay, so we can see that the server is now bringing up the domain. Because this is for the first time, it will take slightly longer because it's busy setting up all permissions and stuff like that. Okay, so let's wait a bit. Okay, so we can see that the server has brought us to the desktop and we are now logged in to the new domain. We can now see that roles are DNS server and Active Directory domain. Okay, so we can also see that it is part of the domain techtips.net.local. Okay, so we can close that, and that will launch the server manager, where we will now configure the dhcp server. To do this, we'll need to create a new role, so add roles. We'll need to click the next button and tick the dhcp server. Need to click next, run through the install. So the preferred DNS server is 10.9.9.9. We can validate that, and it says it's valid because it's running. So Wins is not required. A scope. We want to set up a scope for this server. We'll call this TechTips scope. Starting IP address being 10.9.0.0 modern to 10.9.9.8. We're not going to be using dhcp version 6, and you will need to tick the use current credentials radio button. That will then authorize the dhcp server. I'm not ticking that now because I already have another dhcp server on the network, and that may cause conflicts between them, and then they won't be very happy. Okay, so just let that install. Okay, so it is installed now. Click close, and we can find out that from the administrative tools that dhcp is now installed. We can click on that, and TechTips server, you can see that it's red, although you will need to right click and authorize the server. Okay, so that is my video on how to set up an Active Directory domain and a dhcp server. Okay, so please check out tutorial 2. If you have any questions, please comment in the box below. There will be a link to the download for Windows Server 2008 trial. That'll give you 180 days of free use basically, and yeah, I'll see you in the next tutorial.